All right. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to another edition of Answers Network. I'm your host, Alan Cardoza. For those of you that have been listening, sending in questions and comments, thank you so much. And please continue to help spread the word that every Monday from 11 a.m. to noon Pacific time, this show will bring on special guests that can inspire, educate, and in some cases entertain, while bringing answers and options to making our lives happier, healthier, and more successful. Now, if you can't listen live, don't worry. All of our shows, including the one that we're going to be doing today, can all be found at answers.network. And what I'd really appreciate is if you could all do me a huge favor. Forward one of our shows to your social media group and to someone you know who can benefit from a particular subject. This is one powerful way that we can make a positive influence in the world together. And I tell you, just going based on the statistics alone in regards to relationships, unfortunately, this is one of the shows that I think everybody knows somebody that could benefit from it. Now, our question today is, and it came in from one of our listeners, after 15 years of marriage and 2 children in middle school, how do I get my husband to pay attention to me? Well, the short answer is also the title of our guest's new book. It starts with you. And I love that part about it. Now, the subcategory is The Secret to a Passionate Marriage and a Peaceful Home. Now, after struggling in his own marriage, despite feeling like he was doing everything right by following the mainstream advice, our guest, Chris Parsons, discovered a secret hiding in plain sight that allowed him to totally transform his marriage. He later started coaching married individuals whose spouse had, quote, checked out and wasn't interested in working on things. Now, through that process, he discovered that just advice only worked for a little while. And what people needed was radical belief-shifting new perspectives to be able to create joy, harmony, and passion in their marriage. Now, Chris has been married to his wife, Carrie, since 2010. And they have 4 children that they're homeschooling together. Stay with us as we learn how Chris did it and how you can too. Chris, welcome to Answers Network.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure. I think the best place to start is share with us, where you found yourself and the state of your marriage when you realized you had to do something different.
Yeah, I found myself in the cheapest hotel that I could get because my wife told me that things were toxic and she couldn't be with me anymore. And I was distraught, angry, shocked, and heartbroken, really.
Mm-hmm. Well, what did you do? In other words, in going through the book, you tried everything, and you tried a lot of things of what mainstream media wants us to do. At what point did you go, this just isn't working, I need to try something else?
It was that point, because I really thought that I was a great husband, and I thought I was doing everything I was supposed to do. And so when that happened and she kicked me out, I realized everything I thought I knew about how to be a good husband and how to create a happy, healthy marriage had to be wrong. Doesn't matter what studies it had, doesn't matter, how many books I had read that told me what to do. The evidence was showing me, my marriage was showing me that what I thought made me a good husband was wrong.
Well, take us through some of the things that didn't work, and then tell us how it started to shift.
The biggest thing that doesn't work, it didn't work in my marriage, it's never worked in any marriage that I've ever seen, is blame. And that's what most people are doing. They're playing the blame game. And that's what most people go to marriage counseling for, because marriage counselors just extend the blame game by choosing sides and saying one of you is wrong and one of you is right, and one of you is the good person, one of you is the bad person. And in every case that I've seen coaching people, blame is always a two-way street. There's
Mhm.
never been a case where one person is totally at fault. Now, that doesn't mean that one person isn't doing something wrong,
All right.
but blame gets you nowhere. Pointing the finger, if you point the finger at the economy, you point the finger at the president, you point the finger at your spouse, and you're not working to make things better when you're pointing the finger. And it doesn't work when you're pointing the finger at yourself either. That was a big thing for me, was I had a low sense of self-worth
Sure,
from
sure.
self-loathing and
Mhm.
guilt and shame of beating myself up. And I had to just choose to walk away from that.
One of the thoughts, this sounds like what you're talking about, and I went through a divorce, as many people have. And one of the best things when I went to counseling was, as I kept talking about everything that I thought was wrong, um, the answer that came back was, she's not here. I can't help her. I can't change her. I can
Mhm.
only change how you look at things. Is that a lot of what you're talking about? Is you had to look at yourself and the way that you looked at things?
Yeah, I had to look in the mirror, and it's the one place a lot of times we don't want to look.
Yeah.
But nothing in my life has ever gotten better until I accepted responsibility to create the change that I wanted to see. And you cannot control your spouse, you cannot force them to change, but you can positively influence them to change.
Okay.
But that comes from changing yourself in order to change them.
Well, let's kind of go back to maybe where we get the ideals that we get. And I know you talk about it in the book, and I thought it was a great point. Is that I think that when we're very young, we start looking at the fairy tale. We start, I still have some of my favorite love songs, and I hear them, and I still have a reaction. So let's talk. In your book, you talk about the reality of marriage versus the fairy tale.
Mhm.
Share what you mean by that.
Well, it's kind of, the Disney fairy tale is there's the wedding and then that's the end of the story. Uh, and in the real world, that's just the beginning of the story.
Hmm.
And real life is complicated, it's hard, and there's challenges and there's difficult seasons. There's having a baby is a difficult season, losing a job, losing a parent, all these things that affect us. And when we're sharing our life and doing life together with someone, it affects them, and it affects our marriage.
You just mentioned losing a job, and I'm going to go to it. There's a question that came in. And again, I thank those that take the time to send in questions ahead of time. Oftentimes, those are people who they receive our press release that goes out, but they work in the middle of the day. So they send in some questions ahead of time. We have one on the concept of losing the job. But one of the things that when I saw that question, I did a little research this morning, and I've always thought, in fact, when I was a psych student, I thought that the number one reason was infidelity, as far as the number one reason why, and it turns out that it was losing a job.
Yeah,
uh,
money in general. So
yeah,
there's moving, losing a job, anything that substantially impacts finances
yeah,
has a huge impact on marriage.
yeah. Let me go to that question while we're on that subject. This one reads, I lost my job during COVID and my wife left me, taking our 4-year-old son, and moved in with her parents who live over 2 hours away. I have a new job now, and she seems reluctant to move back in with me. Her latest excuse is that our son has made friends at the preschool he's at. I feel like I'm the only one trying. Her father tells me to keep trying, that she'll come around. What do you suggest I do? And this is from Marcus in Houston, Texas.
So the first thing is that if what you're doing isn't working, do something different. That was, I think, really going back to the ideals that we have about marriage. I think one of the biggest problems is we have these ideas of what we're supposed to do that we're more committed to than we are what the evidence is showing us. And so the evidence is showing him that what he's trying to do isn't working. Speculating, obviously, but typically what I see in a situation like that is his wife doesn't believe that the change is real, that it was only a surface level change, and that that's not enough. For her to want to come back to him, she doesn't want to come back to the marriage that they had. This is something that I work with clients on, is you can't settle for the marriage that you had when your spouse wants a divorce. They don't want to work on things. You have to show them that you are committed to something better, something that would make them happy, because trying to get them to commit to what they had means trying to get them to commit to their own unhappiness.
First of all, I think you're right on target. And when I first read the question, a couple of things popped into my head. One was, I don't think losing the job was the only problem.
Right.
And again, like you said, is that just saying, come back, everything will be okay. And like you said, we don't know all the other details in there, but I love the fact that just kind of getting to the point of whatever it was that you had, if it was great, maybe losing the job wouldn't have been the thing that pushed it over the edge.
Definitely.
Yeah. So for those people that are out there, they're still together, but they feel like something's changed. Something just doesn't seem right. Maybe the communication isn't what it used to be. What do you believe are some of the biggest warning signs that the marriage is in trouble?
Disconnection is a huge one. So, if your spouse is not wanting to spend time with you, not asking you about your day, not putting effort into paying attention to you and the marriage, then they're disconnected. And so, you have to look at your own situation. Sometimes that's an obvious temporary thing. My spouse's, mom just died. Okay, they're going to be distant. You have to have some grace and compassion for that. But for most people, this is something that they've seen it build up for years and years, and it's not just a short season. There's I think, unfortunately, you do have to read between the lines, because like you said, communication is such an issue for so many couples. Some other warning signs, I believe, some people don't like hearing this, but I believe affairs, including emotional affairs, are a warning sign. I believe that they're a symptom of a deeper problem.
Sure.
And that doesn't make them okay. I'm not saying that to shift blame, but they are a symptom that things are not okay in your marriage.
So when you describe that as a symptom, then the first thought that comes to mind is that you're not seeing it as a something that's insurmountable. So talk a little bit about how somebody overcomes that.
Yeah, so I believe in non-judgment. I don't judge my clients' lives. I don't judge their decisions. And I do help them establish their own healthy boundaries, but I don't determine what those boundaries should be for them. For most people, an affair crosses a boundary. However, when you recognize the role that you played in that, and how, okay, I drove them to that by not paying attention to them, not prioritizing them for years and years, and they told me they were unhappy and I just ignored it and didn't think it was that big of a deal, then you start to understand, okay, because I can't remember where I heard this, but there was a quote that said, forgiveness is understanding. And you forgive your spouse when you understand them and why they do the things that they do. And likewise, they forgive you when they understand you and why you've done the things that you've done. And so that's really a choice. You have to make that personal decision, whether that's something you are interested in moving past or not. For me personally, I think a lot of it has to do with the context of how it happened, why it happened. And that's what I find with most of my clients. They're not okay with it, but when they understand, they see a bigger picture, they understand how they played into it, they choose to work on themselves and how they're showing up to fix the underlying problem, and then establish the boundary that this is not acceptable going forward.
I love the fact that what I'm getting from this is that you're talking about personal responsibility.
Yes.
That whatever it is that has occurred, first of all, look inward and see what your level of responsibility is. If there are things that, if you have ignored this person, for a huge amount of time, you have to look inside and say, did you contribute to this? Was there communication about it? Was there warning signs that they were, look, we need to talk about this, and then they don't? So yeah, I love the fact that you're really speaking about the power of personal responsibility. Yeah. Now, you talk in the book about some key secrets that this holds. Tell us a little bit more about some of those things, because in the book I get the feeling that was part of your success, is realizing some of these key secrets.
Yeah, the biggest thing is what I call sincerity, which is acting how you feel and expressing your feelings to your spouse. And I talk to people every day. They say, I'm completely shocked my spouse wants a divorce. I don't understand where this came from. And that happens when you're not openly talking about your feelings. And so when you take personal responsibility, you take responsibility for your hurts. So I take responsibility for my hurts. If my feelings are hurt about something, then I do something about it. Mm-hmm. And the biggest thing is just telling my wife why I'm hurt. It's really important that I do this and that everybody does this in a way that is without judgment or putting responsibility or blame on my wife or on your spouse. And so I acknowledge my feelings without making her feel attacked, because if you try to say how you feel by blaming them, they're going to feel attacked. They'll get defensive. It'll lead to a big argument that goes nowhere.
And I'm a generation or two earlier than you. How much of this do you see with some of your clients that it's kind of the way in which they were raised? And I look at things from the standpoint of, I come from a generation where the men were told, your number one job is provide. Mm-hmm. It didn't say your number one job is to communicate. Your number one job is to ask questions and see what's bothering her. Mm-hmm. That as long as you are doing job number one, you're a good provider, you're doing your job. Mm-hmm. Now, I know that that's changed, but what have you seen in that area, and what have you dealt with some of your clients on how to get them past that?
Yeah, my oldest client was 78, I think. And so, I've dealt with all different age ranges. And when I think about that, whether that's a generational thing, it is getting worse, in my opinion. Wow. And one reason why is cell phones and, computers and everything constantly distracting us and taking our attention away from our marriage and our spouse. But when I think about my grandpa and the marriage he had to my grandma, he wasn't exactly a great communicator, but he was never hiding how he felt. You always knew exactly how he felt about something. And if he wasn't happy, you knew it. And I think that as a society, we've made this shift where we think, no, a good person would act loving even though they feel hurt. No, a good person would do X, Y, Z and ignore how they feel. And all that does is, number one, it breaks sincerity on your part. So now you're not being sincere, so your spouse isn't going to be sincere. Number two, it just leads to compounding hurts because everything just gets brushed under the rug, moved past, and never resolved.
Let's talk about the era of computers, phones, and again, and as an investigator, I see a lot of differences in the way in which people, when we're hired to find things, how do you see this as having affected? And I guess we'll call it the what's the one? I don't know. Tinder.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have this Tinder society now, to where if something isn't quite right, you just swipe.
Mm-hmm.
You just swipe. And I feel like going back a generation or two, you were more interested in working on things, or you're more interested in a face-to-face type of thing. I feel that we've gotten to a point now to where the relationship it's easy to dispose of.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see that as having changed? And what are some people, if they feel like they're stuck in something like that, how can they get out of it?
Yeah, I agree. I think society has changed to make relationships more disposable, less depth, emotional depth and bonding. And really, it's about the escape and the dopamine that we get from these devices and everything. And instead of using them to benefit our lives by watching programs like this, we're watching funny cat videos or whatever. And so, to me, the biggest thing is that it steals our attention. And attention is the most valuable thing that we have. If you have a business, it needs attention. If you have a marriage, it needs attention. And when you are busy on your phone or on your computer all the time and you're not giving attention to the things that really matter to you, then they're going to suffer. And if your spouse is the one doing that, then you have to be able to communicate how that makes you feel in a way that gets them to care about it, not just pretend to be okay.
Right. Which takes us back to what you brought up as issue number one, don't blame. So what I hear you saying is, don't go, okay, your being on that phone is the problem. It's right. What you're saying is, I have a problem. I'm having some uncomfortable feelings about that. And so you're making it on you.
Right. And then also just looking at yourself to say, am I worthy of their attention? If you're just watching Netflix, then why should they prioritize you? If you're in a terrible mood and all you do is complain and you're miserable to be around, why should they want to spend time with you? And so personal responsibility goes the full way.
I love the fact that you brought that up, and it actually reminds me of something that I went through. When you say, are you worthy? After my divorce, I was talking with a gentleman that I knew through it's a Christian men's group. And he started to become somewhat of a mentor. And he talked to me about what he did when he went through his divorce. And he talked about how he found the right one. And he made a list. And he shared his list with me. He said, you need to know what it is that you're looking for. And you need to know what it is that you aren't looking for. And he read this incredibly detailed list, made a copy of it, gave it to me. And I read it. His was, I don't know, like 2 pages. And so I went through and I wrote one, and I took 5 important categories, and I wrote one, and I looked at it, and I thought about it. And then I wrote another one. And that one I wrote was, what are the things that I need to be worthy of the person that I have just written out?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you just brought that up, it reminded me of it. And I think that's so important when somebody is doing something else and you go, I don't understand why golf is more important than me, and it's like, well, let's look inward first.
Right.
So anyway,
Yeah.
my point is, I love that you brought that up.
And I used the word worthy. I actually prefer to use the word deserving, because I believe that we are all inherently worthy of love.
Okay.
But what we deserve is based on how we show up. And when you're not showing up as somebody that is very deserving of love, you're not going to get very much.
All right. Well, so for everybody out there, we're going to take a break, but I want you to stay with us. So again, we're talking about Chris's new book, It Starts With You, The Secret to a Passionate Marriage and a Peaceful Home. And when we come back, I'm going to ask Chris a little bit about some of the problems with mainstream marriage advice. So stay with us. You're watching or listening to Answers Network.
Founded over 30 years ago to meet the needs of families in crisis, West Shield has continually focused on resolving issues that negatively impact families and businesses. Our signature therapeutic transportation service helps to ensure that adolescents in crisis are safely transported to specialized schools, programs, and treatment centers with unsurpassed experience and success. We are supported by our full-service licensed investigation agency that has legally, professionally, and compassionately located hundreds of runaways and teens. We are experienced and qualified to help, offering solutions which may include referrals to our international network of top professionals in the fields of educational consulting, psychology, psychiatry, and investigations. Simply put, West Shield Adolescent Services and West Shield Investigations are the best solutions when your family is facing a personal crisis. Call 1-800-899-8585, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's 1-800-899-8585, or visit our website at westshield.com. Thank you.
And we're back. Our guest is Chris Parsons, and we're talking about his book, It Starts With You, The Secret to a Passionate Marriage and a Peaceful Home. So, Chris, when we went to break, I know you talk a little bit about some of the advice that you got in regards to mainstream advice. Let's talk a little bit about some of the advice that was out there that didn't serve you until you started looking inward.
Real quick, Alan, I did update the title of the book from It Starts With You. That was the original title, It Starts With You. I didn't like that for two reasons. Number one, there was another book that had that same title. And number two, you couldn't tell it was about marriage. So actually, I've republished the book under the title, The Happy, Healthy Marriage Reset, Using Sincerity to Erase Relationship Baggage and Restore the Love.
All right.
So sorry about that. We should have gotten that ironed out before the interview. That was my mistake. But
it might have been on my end as well. So I apologize for that. But while we're talking about that, and so that we can get people thinking along those lines, and actually, I must have gotten some information on it, because it even says here's the new website. So again, the new website is happyhealthymarriagereset.com. So for anybody out there, that's also the title of the book. But if you want to go to the website and get more information, obviously you can go do that as well. For those of you that are driving, don't try to write that down. I'll make sure that we have all of the accurate information on the answers.network website. So thank you for that.
Yes.
So let's talk about, some of the issues, and again, we're not throwing all of mainstream under the bus, but I think that many people have learned that there's certain things that don't work for them. Yeah. And what would you tell somebody that's been searching and they're going through some of these things?
I don't think that the advice is bad per se. The problem is all the things that it ignores. And so, for example, the 5 love languages are great. It's wonderful. But the problem is it becomes a to-do list. And you think, well, I checked off my box, right? Mm-hmm. Your love language is this, and I did that. So now you have to check my box. and it keeps you in a place of blame where,
Mhm.
you could argue, oh, I'm taking responsibility by meeting their need, but it turns marriage into a transaction,
Hmm.
and there's no love in transactions.
And so, and maybe to, as you're saying that, the thought that came through my mind, we go back to the key being communication. Um, a book like that could certainly be a nice tool to communicate, but not maybe a tool to try to fix a problem. That sound about right?
Um, I don't want to talk bad about the book.
No, 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 not that.
But,
I'm just saying like that.
yeah,
Just what I'm saying is that, if, uh, and maybe this is just me thinking it, but, that I think that there are books out there that are a good tool, but maybe not necessarily geared towards fixing a problem as much as just a way to communicate. If it gets you talking about things, gets you talking about, and using that one in particular,
yeah.
somebody's like, "Oh, I didn't realize that you were." That you were words of affirmation. I didn't realize that. So maybe somebody thinks, maybe I need to focus a little more on words of affirmation.
Yeah, I mean,
As a communication tool, it makes sense, but not
yeah, I
necessarily
don't
that
think,
it's going to fix anything.
yeah, it's helpful.
Mhm.
But again, the problem is the way that people approach it and what they think it's for. And, communicating your needs is rarely very effective. Just telling
Huh.
your spouse what you need, I need words of affirmation, whatever, usually is not near as helpful as you think that it would be.
Okay. Well, you bring up a great point then. Then what does a person do if they're not getting their needs met?
Express how you feel, right?
Mhm.
So say, instead of, I need you to do this, because when you tell your spouse what you want them to do or what you need them to do, then they're going to feel controlled. And most people, generally speaking, don't respond well to that. They rebel against feeling controlled. And so just expressing, hey, I'm feeling like I'm not important to you because you don't give me words of affirmation, and giving your spouse an opportunity to make you happy. And when you frame it in the right way to get them to care, instead of to give them something to do or to make them feel attacked, the vast majority of the time they care, they want to make you happy. But the
Mhm.
way that most people are approaching it, it's just building resentment, because the what happens is, okay, I tell my wife, I need this, and then she does it, and I'm not happy because I'm like, you just did it because I told you I wanted you to do it, right? And and that goes both ways. That's not just me.
Mhm.
And because what we actually want is our spouse's desire, and the way that we create that desire in them is by expressing our feelings rather than telling them what we want them to do.
Okay. So kind of giving a bit of an example then would be, instead of saying, I need you to do this, that during the time in which that does happen, praising them for how much you appreciate that it's being done. When it's
Yes.
being
So
done.
a simple example,
Yeah.
instead of do the dishes, I love coming home to a clean kitchen, right? So you're saying an outcome that you want, that you appreciate, and then you have to act like you actually appreciate it, right? Because if you come home and the kitchen's been cleaned and you're like, okay, whatever, then they're not going to be very inclined to keep doing that.
Right. Or
But if you
you're not showing appreciation.
right,
Got
but
it.
if you say, I love coming home to a clean kitchen, you're not putting an obligation on them. You're not telling them what to do. You're not making them feel controlled. You're giving them an opportunity to make you happy.
Yes. Okay. We've
It's a
got
very different concept.
yeah, no, I love it. We've got a couple more questions that have come in. I want to make sure and get these in before we, while we have time. Um, we mentioned earlier about cheating. Cheating was one of the subjects. We have a question that has come in on that. And this one says, cheating is a huge issue for me, and unfortunately, the reason I left my husband. Finding out was quite the revelation, especially the fact that the last woman he was involved with actually believed he was single. I need to move on, and I feel I deserve better, but he is stalling the divorce and begging that I not go through with the divorce. How does one even go about trying to save a marriage with a person like this? And this is Melissa in Arizona.
Yeah, I think you really have to look at the circumstances of what led to the cheating and decide if it's something that you're willing to work on or not. And if it's something that he's willing to change, right? If he's got a sex addiction, if he's got, some kind of, he's not processing his feelings, or he's filled with pride and ego, there's a reason for why he's doing what he's doing, most likely. The majority of the time, cheaters actually want monogamy. They want to be in a committed relationship, but there's something going on that's causing them to look outside their marriage. Sometimes, people just don't really want a monogamous relationship with one person. And so I'm guessing, because he's begging you to not get divorced, that he wants monogamy. And so really it's a question of you establishing a boundary, of saying what kind of, try to figure out what is going on with him, and then that he needs to get help for that, for you to consider it.
Yeah. And I was kind of thinking along the same lines as you, was saying, well, if he's begging, I'm guessing that part of that is that this will never happen again. But at the same time, not knowing, was this the first time? Was this the 15th time? And
Right.
and so on. There's so much more that can be going on. But communicate.
And the promise that it won't happen again does not mean very much. And that's probably what she's struggling with. He probably has promised that. But that promise means very little, because he also promised never to do it, and he broke that promise. And so that's why it really goes back to understanding why he did what he did, because just promising to change is not enough. You have to deal with, what is the underlying issue? Is it low self-worth? Is it, he's seeking validation from other women? That's the issue that has to be addressed for you to believe that he can actually keep that promise.
When before we came on the air, I mentioned about a term that most everybody has heard at some point in time, and that's the term happy wife, happy life. When I brought it up, you had an interesting twist on it. Share your thoughts on that.
I was a big proponent of that term when my wife kicked me out and told me she didn't want to be with me. And so, it really made me take a step back and question my commitment to that belief. And ultimately what I saw is that all the things that I thought I was doing to make my wife happy, I was actually just appeasing her. I was doing what was easiest to make her happy and disregard my feelings and my needs. And I was building up resentment in myself. And, hurt people hurt people. So I'm building up resentment because I'm doing all these things for her. And she's thinking, well, you wanted to do them. You could have said no. And I'm thinking, but I did them to make you happy, and you're still not happy. But I wasn't actually making her happy. I mean, if you actually understood how to make your wife happy, there's nothing wrong with the term happy wife, happy life. The problem is what we think will make our wife happy. And the same thing is true for wives trying to make their husbands happy.
Now, would you say that part of that issue is the lack of communication? In other words, your belief of what you thought would make her happy without communicating to a point to find out what really would?
Partially, but most people don't know what would actually make them happy. Even though I would ask, what would make you happy? What most of us think will make us happy doesn't actually make us happy. We get the promotion, we get the thing that we think we want that will make us happy, and then we're just on to the next thing because that didn't do the trick.
And the other thing that you just touched on a little bit was, or at least my perception of what you were going towards, is you started to lose yourself. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah.
What do you say to those people that are out there, or if you have stories of clients that you've worked with where the issue became that they just lost themselves?
Very common. And, I had a client that I worked with Greg, and he, used to do all these, he used to rock climb and all these things. Then he gets married. He starts cutting back. He's not, going out to the bar with his friends anymore. Then they have a kid. Now he's not going rock climbing. And then he gets, a promotion at work. And now he's not doing anything for himself. And I always tell my clients, you can't pour out of an empty cup. Your spouse needs to feel loved. That is really, that's what marriage is built on, is love. And they need to feel loved. And in order for you to feel love in return, you have to give to get. But you can't pour out of an empty cup. And we have to take responsibility for our own happiness and not make that our spouse's responsibility. That's what I did was, I made it my wife's responsibility to make me happy rather than taking responsibility for my own happiness.
I like that. As you were saying that, I had another thought. But if you can share, I'm checking out the time. Share a couple of success stories, because I think there's people out there that they're struggling. They may or may not have started talking to anyone else about it, but share one of your favorite success stories to where there's going to be somebody out there that's going to be watching or listening, and they're going to go, yeah, I think that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I'll share two if that's okay. One from a husband that I worked with and one from a wife. And so the first was a husband I worked with, Mike. He only had text interactions with his wife. She had kicked him out. He moved out across town to an apartment. And she would only text about the kids, for scheduling. She didn't want to talk to him. He decided to come into the program to get coaching. And he had all of these hurts that he was holding on to. He was feeling really bad about himself and had a problem processing his emotions. And so whenever work would get stressful, he would get angry and distant and really unenjoyable for his wife and kids to be around. And so that's the first stage of our coaching, is we help you process your feelings, because your best marriage needs your best self. And that's on the other side of letting go of judging yourself, of guilt, shame, pride, ego, and any feelings that you're having a tough time processing. What most people are doing is they're trying to control their feelings, and they're trying to stuff their feelings deep down and act how they think they're supposed to act. And that always fails, always. What actually works is acknowledging the feeling, processing it, and then expressing it in a useful way. And so 8-9 weeks into the program, his wife was asking him to move back in, and things have been going really well with them ever since. And that was, based on that change that he made in himself to show up the way that he wanted to show up as a man that his wife and kids respected and loved and wanted to be around, and deeply missed when he wasn't there anymore.
And it sounds like he became his authentic self rather than the self he thought was what they wanted.
Yeah, what I say is your best self is the you that you would show up as if you didn't have all these feelings about yourself in the way. It's not about fundamentally changing who you are to try to, make your spouse happy. but being the version of you who you really are, when you're not beating yourself up and feeling really bad about yourself, or for that matter, feeling really good about yourself and thinking your stuff don't stink.
We have another question that has come in, and this one reads, my daughter and her husband were separated for a year, and they are now back together trying to work things out for the children's sake. They are both good people, but as I'm sure you know, rekindling love isn't all that simple. I'm looking forward to this show and would like to know how your approach differs from the thousands of marriage counselors and relationship books out there. It's from Nancy in California.
Yeah, good question. I think ultimately there's two things. Number one, fundamentally, I believe in personal responsibility, which is very different than the way that most people are approaching marriage. And it's the reason that I'm able to have success with only one spouse, where the other spouse, once a divorce, is uninterested in working on things. Because when you take responsibility for how you show up and how you approach things, you can get a different outcome. And I found that that is just a completely different approach. Every other marriage book I've ever read is all about a formula. If I do X and my spouse does Y, then we'll have the happy, healthy marriage. And the problem with that formula is that most of the time you find yourself, checking your box and then your spouse not checking theirs. And you're just left stuck in that formula. Whereas personal responsibility, you always know there's something you can do. As far as rekindling the passion, the biggest thing is that the hurts have to be resolved. Whatever those past issues were, they can't just be moved past. You have to actually deal with them. They have to be addressed, and all the pain from them has to be taken away, not buried. Mm-hmm. And then it's just a process of deepening the emotional connection and bond. But what happens for most people, the reason that the saying, I love you, but I'm not in love with you, is so popular is because resentment overtakes the feeling of love. And so washing away the resentment solves the majority of the problem.
I like that. Okay, so we've just got just a couple of minutes. So just give a quick description. And again, folks, the book is The Happy Healthy Marriage Reset. Okay, that's the name of the book. It's been republished. And so again, just in the next minute or so, just give us a couple of little nuggets from that and let us know as far as and I can put the website on ours. If there's a best place to get it, if you can get it anywhere, if you get it at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, or whatever, or go right to the website.
Yeah, the best place to get it is at the website, www.happyhealthymarriagereset.com. The paperback version is available on Amazon if you prefer paperback. But, one thing I will say, I've already done 3 versions of the book. I'm working on the 4th version. And so everybody that buys through the website gets those updated copies free. I am a first-time author. It's been a learning curve as far as the process of how to write a really good book. And so I feel like every time I can make the book 25% better, if I can make it at least 25% better, I'm going to do a new version. And so that's what I've done a few times now, and I'm already working on the next one.
I like that, and I like the fact that you're offering, that as you come up with more stuff, you're going to put it out there for everybody who has already bought the book. Very nice.
Yeah, and the bonuses, we've got several great bonuses that come with the book when you buy it through the website. One of them is a decision-making worksheet to determine if your marriage is worth saving, because I know a lot of people just get stuck right there where they're not even sure if it's worth trying. And, I will say it's always worth it to work on yourself. And if you get the book from the website, you can go through that worksheet to determine whether it's worth it to work on your marriage.
That's great. Chris, thank you so much. And when you have the next update, let us know, and we can come back and see what new things we can learn.
Absolutely.
All right. So for everybody out there, again, that's Chris Parsons. Check out the book. And you can also, again, if you're driving or can't write all of that down, go to answers.network. We will have everything on our site. For everybody out there, be with us next week when we're joined by Charlotte Maya as she discusses her new book, Sushi Tuesdays. It's a memoir of love, loss, and family resilience. And please visit our archives of past interviews at answers.network, or just subscribe to the show through Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, Rumble, Spreaker, and so many more. If you like what you hear, please leave a review. It helps us reach more people, and I want you to know we greatly appreciate it. We want to continue to bring you positive content, and we want to continue to bring you people that can make your life better. Next time you're on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, please remember, stop by our page, check out our latest posts. If you like them, like us, and spread the word. For everybody out there, be good human beings, and be with us again next week on Answers Network.
You're listening to Answers Network with Alan Cardoza, only on LA Talk Radio.